Hi everyone, today's review will be about 5 great tomato varieties that I got for the first time this season. Each of them was able to make an impression, and all of them absolutely deserve your attention. After all, we all want to grow delicious tomatoes, which makes choosing the right varieties to plant an especially crucial process. Let me try to help you with that very choice. Let's not waste another minute and get to the review. Tomato Express is on its way. Take your seats, we're getting started. And to begin with, I'll show you an unusual cherry tomato called Pink Quartz Multiflora. As you may have already guessed from the name, the variety has giant multiflora-type clusters and produces a huge number of small pink-colored fruits. The plants are quite tall and have a thin stem, which is typical for most indeterminate varieties of cherry tomatoes, and by midsummer, their growth was approaching 7 feet or 2 meters. Despite the small size of the fruits, the branches are still heavy due to the number of these cherry tomatoes. But at the same time, they are quite strong and didn't break, even considering the fact that I did not tie them up at all. The Pink Quartz Multiflora tomato variety was discovered in 2002 in the garden of Carolyn Curry from Massachusetts among the plants of a Japanese variety called Rose Quartz, which has bunches of the regular type. The plants produce literally hundreds of cherry fruits, so they are a joy to look at. In addition, they hold perfectly at the stalk and are not prone to falling off, which allows you to harvest whole clusters, which is exactly what I did. There was no point in weighing the tomatoes individually, and it was easier to weigh the whole bunch at once. The first harvested one weighed 1 pound and 13 ounces or 834 grams, which is very decent for a cherry tomato even though it is multiflora. But still, the main question remained open, whether these tomatoes would be tasty. And they did indeed turn out to be. Sweet cherry tomato flavor just the way I like it. Pink Quartz Multiflora, I think, is a very good variety for fans of growing cherry tomatoes. Beautiful, productive, tasty, sweet, and watching these huge clusters of blossoms can be endless. And of course, the way its fruits are securely held on the bunches, no matter what I did with them. Took pictures in my hands, carried them in the car, put them on my head to take selfies, but they still didn't fall off. That's very convenient to me. Well, I think I've told you everything I wanted to tell you about Pink Quartz Multiflora tomato, and let's move on. Next, we'll talk about an Italian tomato variety called Ancient Heart of Ravenna. This Ancient Heart is an heirloom tomato from the equally ancient city of Ravenna in northern Italy, a city that in its time even managed to be the capital of the mighty Western Roman Empire for 250 years. The white road rang beneath my horse's feet, and musing on Ravenna's ancient name, I watched the detail marked with wounds of flame. The turquoise sky to burnished gold was turned. These are the lines dedicated to the city of Ravenna by Oscar Wilde in his poem of the same name. I haven't yet had the chance to visit this, I'm sure, beautiful city, but I managed to touch a piece of it in the form of the Ancient Heart of Ravenna tomato. And at that very moment, Italy seemed to become a little bit closer. And now let's have a closer look at this magnificent dark-fruited variety. Indeterminate plants reached a height of 5 feet 3 inches or 1.6 meters by mid-season. Plants are strong, high-yielding, and disease-resistant. Pear-shaped fruits of dark purple color at full maturity acquire a beautiful chocolate shade. Overall, they look great, just as I expected. I was also looking forward to the first tasting. For some reason, it was Ancient Heart of Ravenna that especially intrigued me. And of course, I didn't want to be disappointed with such a nice-looking variety. The average weight of the tomatoes ranged from 6 to 7 ounces or 173 to 200 grams. And now I had to find out why for decades and possibly centuries, people had been saving and passing on the seeds of this variety from generation to generation. On the cut, the fruit is the color of a classic dark tomato. And the flavor is just fabulous. It literally screamed for me to eat more. The tomatoes are very juicy, with bright, brilliant acidity, having a sweet and excellent flavor. There are a lot of good words to say, but it's not even easy to find them, because the variety is truly a rich and complex tomato flavor. Without a doubt, ancient Heart of Ravenna is another jewel that has made its way into my tomato collection as well as my recommendation list. I'm not Oscar Wilde, but I think if he had dedicated lines to this tomato, they would sound something like this. No matter what tomatoes I have faced, I never will forget Ravenna's taste. In addition, as you are about to find out, this season I found a perfect match for this variety, with fruits of the same unusual shape, but of a completely different color. And I'm talking now about Polish tomato Jarson 13, or rather about its mutation discovered by Sofia Saakova in the F5 generation. That's why it's also called Jarson 13 ochre pear, and as it seems to me, this mutation turned out to be very successful. First of all, the shape of the fruit is pear-like with a slight ribbing, certainly beautiful. Secondly, the color, another variety of ochre color, which I personally like very much in tomatoes. In the third, their flavor, although let's talk about everything in order. Plants with a leaf of the regular type and quite tall. By the beginning of August, reached a mark of 5 feet 3 inches or 1.6 meters. Tomatoes are reminiscent of the appearance of honey bags, if only such exist in nature. The variety is also resistant to major tomato diseases and well tolerated the heat. And in general, it pleased the eye at every visit to the greenhouse. The weight of the fruit was almost the same throughout the season and was about 6 ounces or 157 grams. The tomatoes are dense and a pleasure to cut. Inside, the ochre color with noticeable orange tones immediately draws attention. It all adds up to a rather pleasing picture to the eye. The flavor is also appropriate. There is both sweetness and tartness and just a good balance of flavors. It is interesting, very much so, this flavor. However, it could not be different with such a beautiful and unusual tomato. Thanks to its consistency, these fruits do not fall apart when sliced, and therefore are ideal for salads or sandwiches, or anything your culinary imagination can do. I am of course glad that Jarson 13 ochre pear and ancient Heart of Ravenna came into my garden in the same season, and if you haven't grown them yet, I would advise you to plant them side by side and compare them. Rather, not even to compare them, but to appreciate their flavor, which in both cases is undoubtedly good. Next, I'll show you a variety which seeds have traveled a long way across the ocean for me to grow. I received them as a gift from a breeder from the Dwarf Tomato Project from Australia, and it's called Dwarf Barossa Moon. And it's a dwarf tomato variety with a potato leaf. Oh wait, it is a potato, here is Barossa Moon. Beautiful and sturdy plants with a wrinkled potato leaf, strong stems and intense growth vigor. By the end of July, they were about 3 feet 11 inches or 1.2 meters tall, and I was especially pleased with this, as I grew dwarf tomatoes under a high support where there is no need to limit their growth. I had 2 plants and grew them in 3 and 4 stems. The foliage of this variety is wide, so it's desirable to leave more space between the plants. Barossa Moon sets fruits without skipping, though sometimes you cannot notice them, again because of the thick and large foliage. The tomatoes are small and rounded, like light yellow ping pong balls. The Dwarf Tomato Project website describes them as ivory-colored. I had never thought of this comparison before, but it sounds interesting and in this case true. Dwarf Barossa Moon originated from a cross made by Ray South in 2009, and one of its parents is Snow White Cherry, already mentioned by me in previous reviews. So the genetics is quite good here as well. Dwarf Barossa Moon is another rather rare variety that has entered my collection, and it definitely deserves to be better known. The tomatoes were all about the same size and weight, over 2 ounces, or between 60 and 66 grams on average. So they are more of a cocktail type. The tomatoes are dense, nice to cut, and of course, even nicer to eat. And during the tasting, it was hard to stop myself. I ate more, and all for one simple reason. And this reason, as you have probably guessed, their flavor. It is very good. Tomatoes are juicy, with acidity and sweetness. In my opinion, it's a wonderful variety. The flavor is bright, interesting, balanced, something reminiscent of sweet and tart apricot. Without further ado, I liked Dwarf Barossa Moon 100%, and I recommend it to everyone. And I'm also endlessly happy that I managed to get seeds of this amazing, sunny, and delicious tomato. Now be careful, the next tomato might steal your heart. Yes, rest assured, because it's called the Dwarf Purple Heartthrob. This little fellow, only about 2 feet 7 inches or 80 centimeters tall, was first introduced by the Dwarf Tomato Project in 2021 and has been steadily gaining popularity ever since. And that's not surprising, given how wonderful it has turned out to be. Heart-shaped fruits with an interesting coloring, purple decorated with green stripes with a metallic tint. And in this, they reminded me of Berkeley tie-dye heart tomato. And as it turned out, not for nothing. Because when preparing this review, it became clear that the parents of this handsome tomato were Berkeley tie-dye heart and Dwarf Purple Heart. Such wonderful parents just had to get a worthy offspring. And that's exactly what happened. Besides, it's a large fruited dwarf, but at the same time humble and not taking up much space. Despite the stated weight of the fruits ranging from 5 to 12 ounces, some of my tomatoes significantly exceeded these figures and reached the mark of 14 ounces and even 1 pound 3 ounces or 413 and 551 grams. That is, they looked literally gigantic against the background of such a small plant. And besides, the fruits themselves are probably one of the most beautiful in the dwarf tomato family. And if you're still wondering if it will be as beautiful when sliced, don't hesitate, it is. The purplish pink flesh with greenness in the seed cavities looks great, and as for the flavor, it immediately shows a bright acidity that overpowers the sweetness. I only tasted one small piece, but I felt a ton of flavor, and since the word heartthrob is usually used to describe a famous man, often a singer or an actor who is attractive to many women, well, this word suits Dwarf Purple Heartthrob just fine. Another strong recommendation for those who are looking for a beautiful and tasty tomato. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and of course, love tomatoes, grow tomatoes. This is the Lucky Garden channel and see you soon.
Good love is hard to find. No more ringing your bell. I should have left your love behind, but I was caught up in your spell. Good love is hard to find.